Introducing Gary Bertwhistle from Blue Moon Creative. Based in Sydney, Australia, Gary speaks to audiences all over the world about thinking. Gary's engaging, interactive and entertaining speeches will have you thinking differently about your imagination, innovation and your ability to generate ideas. He has worked with some of the world's biggest brands to stimulate different thinking. Following is a snapshot of Gary's recent presentation to media and business executives at Lord's Cricket Ground in London.
So to kick off, I'd like to introduce somebody who has travelled a very, very long way to be with us today. He's flown all the way over from Sydney. He is Australia's pioneering creative thinker. He's somebody who is the founder of Blue Moon Creative. He's a man who also owns a fascinating venue in Sydney called The Vault. And The Vault really is just a unique venue. It was an old bank vault that he has converted into a creative space. And businesses and people from all over Australia go to that venue to be creative, to think about being creative. He is somebody who knows all about creativity. I personally am delighted that he's made the effort to fly across the world to be with us today. So please put your hands together for Gary Bertwhistle.
Here's a little exercise that was done in the United States. They said if you could measure the imagination of has anyone who's like 2-year-old or thereabouts? Any couple of young kids in the room? All right. For those people, would it be fair to say that when a child is 2 years old, anything goes? They're touching stuff and asking questions and the world's an oyster. And they said if you can measure the creativity of a 2-year-old, pretty much a 2-year-old is using all their imagination. They're using everything that's going on up here in the whole brain. Then they said, well, what if you could measure the creativity of a 5-year-old? How much imagination of it was an average 5-year-old child be using, imagination and creativity? What percentage do you reckon? Have a stab. 20? It's a harsh crowd. 70? Oh, up there. What happened here? Went to school. That's what's happening back home. I went to school, they started hearing things like, don't do that, can't do that, no. This is the way, nice, this is the way it is. Johnny, what are you doing? The sky's not green, do it again and stay inside the lines. You know? Now, thankfully, this looks a pretty young crowd, so none of us have got to this age yet, right? But they measured, apart from Roger, they measured the Olympics for a long time ago. They measured the creativity, imagination of the average 40-year-old. What percentage do you think was here? Have a crack. It's a high crowd. 10, 5? Minus 40. %. And of course there are no average 40-year-olds in this room. But the average 40-year-old is using 2% of their imagination. Here's the cool thing and the reason I do this session, the thing I get the most kicks out of. This other 98%, you haven't lost it, you're just not using it because we're becoming half-wits. We're doing exactly what everybody else is doing and we're expecting a different result. What you have to understand is this 98% is inside you waiting to be unlocked. Kate's going to talk to you in a little while about being in an ad agency and in a creative department and take you through all that sort of stuff. And I was working with a creative director of a big ad agency in Sydney and I was going in to show him some of the tools that I've created which are card sets and pad sets that I've invented for people to be able to use as part of their toolbox. And I went there and said, well, the other thing I want you to talk to my guys about is having a creative sorbet. I went, oh, cool name. Creative sorbet, what's that? And he said, well, what happens is our creative directors sit at their computer or at their desk and they'll do a brief for Hyundai and then they'll finish that and go straight into one for Kellogg's, so straight into one for American Express, then straight into one for a beer company. And they're constantly going bang, 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 just turning out all these briefs. He said, like, their work can't be that great. I want them to have a palate cleanser between each one, like a creative sorbet, let them drop their shoulders and think differently. Can you suggest some things we could do? And we did a session on it. Then I started reading about a sports psychologist called Dr. Jim Lower, who wrote a book called The Power of Full Engagement. Has anybody read it? This guy works with the great tennis players. Arantxa Sanchez Vicario, Pete Sampras, Lendl, these sorts of guys. And what he did is he did a research study that said, what's the difference between the good tennis players and the outstanding tennis players? And they put a heart rate monitor on them. And what they found was that the good or average tennis players, their heart rate was always, 172 to 175 the whole match. So as the match wore on, the average players started to get tired. Because there was a high heart rate the whole time, you can't maintain it. Then they put the heart rate on the outstanding tennis players like the Samprases and Hewitts and these sorts of guys, and they found their heart rate would peak at maybe 168, but then it dropped down to 142. 168, dropped down to 142. And what they found was all through the match, their heart rate was going up and then dropping, up and dropping. And they said, well, why is that? How does that work? And they discovered the great tennis players have what they call rituals. You may remember, anyone old enough to remember Lendl when he played tennis? Remember Lendl's ritual he had? He'd play a point, he'd go to the baseline, he'd wipe the sweat from his brow, he'd grab his racket, hit his heel 3 times, put his hand in his pocket, bring out some sawdust, bounce the ball 4 times, visualise the point, and then he'd serve. Next point, wipe the sweat from his brow, hit his heels 3 times, hand in his pocket, sawdust out, bounce the ball 4 times, visualise the point, and then he'd serve. Each time he did it, his heart rate dropped. So he was going in and out of this period. So as the game wore on, he was still rather fresh. Jim Lower's point was, what's your ritual? Because creativity works best when you are relaxed. When you drop your shoulders and you have those moments where you just relax, that's where that 98% is the most accessible, which is why kids have it more than we have it, because we're always That's why you have great ideas when you're on holidays. You have great ideas when you're relaxing, sitting. What's your ritual? Now look, I'm not in Australia, you can't smoke in buildings. You go past the American Express building in George Street and there's 1,000 people outside all having smokes because they've got to go to the footpath and do it. And I'm not one for ever thinking smoking is good. But the ritual of leaving your desk and going outside to drop your shoulders gets, well, I was going to say fresh air. They don't really get fresh air, do they? You go outside to get some air and they talk to the people around them is actually a really good ritual. And that's why smokers say it's actually a really good place for us to go and actually get some really good ideas. We throw some ideas around and we relax. I'd rather see you do it with an apple or a cup of tea. Think about you as an executive. What's your ritual? Are you just 24/7 till you fall over and go on holidays? Or do you create these rituals? Because if you're not creating the rituals, I'd be guaranteed the people around you don't have a ritual. And if you're not leading from the front, then I guarantee the people aren't using you as an example and wanting to do the same thing.
Gary speaks with groups to encourage them to think differently about innovation, creativity, marketing, brands, innovation, selling, personal leadership and performance, and how you can create new and better ideas for your business. Gary's first book, The Keys to Creativity, is available at Borders, all good booksellers, and online at www.bluemooncreative.com.au.